Hi everyone, welcome to the first ever Useful Genetics field trip. This idea started when I used the Romanesco cauliflower as an example of a possible developmental mutant in a lecture. Students posted on the discussion forum that this was very delicious. But they live in Europe where it's widely available, whereas I'd never seen it in Vancouver. So Maria and I decided it was time for a field trip to Vancouver's Granville Island Public Market to see if we could find the Romanesco cauliflower. The Granville Island Market is a big, sprawling market very close to Vancouver's downtown, and it's got an enormous diversity of produce in it. So here's Maria and I about to head into the market. We didn't know if we'd find the cauliflower, but we knew we'd find a lot of very interesting produce. So here's peppers like the ones that I introduced in Lecture 3B, the wild-type ripe red pepper, the unripe green pepper behind it, and two mutant peppers, yellow and orange, that are defective at steps in the pathway that synthesizes the red pigment. Here's the same phenotypes in tomatoes. Tomatoes are closely related to peppers, so it's probably the same genes. And here's potatoes, also closely related to peppers, but with mutations in a different pathway affecting a purple pigment called anthocyanin. And on the left, the root vegetable that Americans and Canadians call yams or sweet potatoes, again with the same pigment variations. Here's maize, what Americans and Canadians call corn. This is the variety called Indian corn that's really popular as a decoration at harvest festivals and Thanksgiving celebrations. The different colors are caused by mutations in different pathways that affect synthesis of different pigments. The kernel on the far left, the cob on the far left, is an example of the kinds of things that are sometimes given to genetics students as a genetics problem to figure out what were the genotypes of the parents that produced this cob. On the right, we have the grain quinoa in black, pale, and red colors. And here are lots of lentils in all kinds of different colors, and different colors of rice as well. Here are some vegetables that we normally think of as only coming in one color, beets, but orange varieties as well as the deep red ones, and yellow and purple carrots as well as the normal carrot-colored orange ones. Here's a close-up of some of the kernels on one of those cobs of Indian corn, and of some tomatoes, the kind that are often called heirloom tomatoes. And in both cases, you see stripiness in the pigments, and that's because of somatic mutations. After the kernel or the fruit is growing, mutations happen in the pigment pathways. Often these are transposable elements that are cutting themselves out of pigment genes, restoring normal pigment function. So you get stripes of cells that can produce normal pigment against a background of cells that can't. Here's some cabbages, two different colors, again dark purple, anthocyanin producing cabbages and pale ones, and a cabbage that has a mutation in the leaf development pathway that's caused its leaves to be all crinkled. This is the Savoy Cabbage. And two kinds of poinsettias. Again, these are actually leaves, not flowers. And they're in two colors, a deep red pigment and white, completely free of pigment. Here's another mutation that affects the shape of the leaves. This is the variety of endive that's called frisee, and it's indeed extremely frizzy. Its leaves form very long curly threads. Here's another leaf that's very curly. This is a kind of kale cabbage. Kale is a kind of cabbage, and it's varying in the amount of pigment. So at the center, it's producing lots of red pigment, but out around the edges, it's producing mainly green and some pigment-free white areas. Here's a couple of examples of variations that are caused by changes in the numbers of chromosomes. On the left are big, typical market strawberries. They're way bigger than the original wild strawberries, and that's because instead of having the normal 2 copies of their chromosomes, they've got 8 or 10 or even 12 copies of their chromosomes. They're polyploid. The grapes on the right are seedless, and seedless fruit are often seedless because they're triploid. They have 3 sets of chromosomes, which makes them unable to produce seeds because they can't get their chromosomes properly organized. The next slide shows different varieties of relative plants, all in the family Umbelliferae. And these are varieties in which different parts of the plant have been developed by plant breeders. Roots for the carrots, the base of the root for the fennel, the stalk for the celery, and the leaves for the parsley. Those are very ordinary vegetables. Here's some exotic fruits. On the right, we have bananas, both the normal bananas, the Chiquita bananas, and then some plantains, which are bananas cooked like vegetables, and sweet little finger bananas. On the left, we've got the tropical fruit called sugar apples. Maria was familiar with this, although I'm not. Now, here's a silly vegetable. These are what are called gooseneck gourds. They're a variety of squash that grows in a shape that looks like a bird. Now, no one's going to mistake these for real birds, but here's a vegetable that is really doing a very good job of pretending to be a flower. Now, these are tulips. These are real flowers. They've got mutations that cause them to not produce any pigment in their petals, except for green chlorophyll along the bases of each petal. Now, here are close-ups of parts of 2 bouquets of flowers that we found at Granville Island. And in both cases, these bouquets contained cabbages, where the leaves of the cabbages were pretending to be the petals of flowers. On the right, a cabbage with ornately patterned leaves with green chlorophyll patterns, looking like a green and white dappled rose, or a camellia. And on the right, little cabbage buds. Again, what looks like pink and white petals are actually the leaves of a small cabbage. Now, finally, one really ridiculous item that luckily is not genetic. This is the grapple. These are apples that taste like grapes, not because of a mutation that produces grape flavor, but because they've been soaked in artificial grape flavoring. I think that's pretty disgusting. Now, here's a shot from the back of the market looking out. You can see it was a great, gorgeous morning, lots of sunshine, and you can see across to all the skyscrapers in Vancouver's downtown and all the yachts on Falls Creek. Here's Maria and I getting ready to go away empty-handed. We didn't find the Romanesco cauliflower. Now, it would have been really nice if we could have taken the Aquabus. This is a little passenger putt-putt ferry that takes you across to downtown, but neither of us were going to downtown. Maria took the bus to her laboratory at the hospital, and I got on my bike to ride to the university. But I took one more photograph on my commute. This is the view from the top of the hill on the way to the university, and you can see you can't see Granville Island because it's behind the trees off at one edge of these 2 shots, and then UBC is off to the other edge. But you can see downtown Vancouver with all the skyscrapers against the mountains. You can see the water and Stanley Park, more mountains, suburbs against the mountains, and all the way to UBC. Now, I didn't give up on my hope of finding the Romanesco cauliflower, so I sent out a tweet instead, and Twitter was a savior because somebody responded telling me that I can find Romanesco cauliflowers at Nat Bailey Stadium. There's a winter farmers market there, so tomorrow I'm off to Nat Bailey Stadium to see if I can find the elusive Romanesco cauliflower.